everyone, how you doing? Dan here, and today we're at Reddish Vale again. Today we're going to have a quick look at how to get the best video out of your Mini 2 drone. So if you haven't seen the previous videos on my YouTube channel, that was how to get the best photos out of your Mini 2 drone. Make sure to head over to my YouTube channel and check them out there. Also, I just wanted to say hi to all the new subscribers on the channel. Hi, I'm Dan. Thank you very much for subscribing, and to all the old subscribers, thank you very much for sticking around and watching my content. It does mean a lot. But let's get straight into the video. So first things first, I think probably one of the most important rules with getting great video is to get your exposure and white balance right. In the app, once you've connected all your drone and everything, you'll see at the bottom right, it probably says auto with a camera, and we need to get out of auto mode. To get great video, we want to be in manual mode. So we'll just tap that auto button and it'll flip over to pro mode. And then once we're in pro mode, you can see we've got 4K 30, 160, 400, WB. So that's all of our settings. So 4K 30, that's our resolution and frame rate, which we'll come on to in a sec. S160 is our shutter speed. Now that's going to be really important to capture great video, so I'll come on to that in a second as well. So we've also got ISO, so this is a digital way of increasing the overall exposure. Ideally we want to keep that as low as possible, but again we'll come on to that in a sec. And finally we've got WB, which is our white balance. It's really important we take our white balance out of auto mode, and you just do that by tapping white balance, and you see that little auto switch there on and off. If you leave this in automatic mode, it doesn't matter for pictures because you've got raw files and you can change it. But when you're in video mode, you can't change your white balance very well in post-production. You can tweak it, but you can't change it as much as you probably want to. So if you get this wrong, your footage is either going to look a bit too blue or a bit too orange. And also, whilst you're in automatic mode, whilst you're flying through the sky, your white balance might fluctuate a bit. If I just put this on auto mode, just so you can see what I'm saying. So you see, that's 56, 55, 54. I just rotate it a little bit, 53, 52. So this becomes a really big problem when you come to editing your footage, because then fluctuations in white balance, it can be even harder to correct. So what I tend to do is I just use auto to kind of look at what the white balance is of the scene. So that's looking around 54, 55, and I'll take it off auto and then set it to that number, just so I know I've got a pretty accurate white balance. So as you can see here, that scene's looking quite natural, it's looking quite good, and I'd be happy to get out and film in with that white balance. We've also got exposure. So the exposure is how bright the scene is, and this includes some creative choices as well. With video exposure, the shutter speed ideally needs to be double your frame rate. So as you can see, my frame rate's 30 at the moment, so that means my shutter speed should be 1/60. This is so you can capture that really nice cinematic motion blur. If you end up with a shutter speed of, 1/100, 1/1000, 1/640, it goes on and on and on. Your images are going to be super sharp, and there's going to be no motion blur in them. So when you come to watch it, it's going to be a series of super sharp images played back together, and the connection between the two images has kind of been lost. So if you just get that little bit of motion blur, it kind of connects the two images, and then when you watch it as a video, it looks a bit more cinematic and it looks better. So just try and keep your shutter speed double your frame rate. Now, tip number 2, which we're going to come on to in a sec, is going to help out with that as well. And ISO, so we want to keep the ISO as low as possible. So I've got mine as 400, I don't normally go above that. And you can see with my histogram here, I'm pretty much quite nicely exposed. The sky is almost blowing out, but as you see, so on the histogram, anything to the left is underexposed, anything to the right is overexposed. As you can see there, that's quite a nice, I've got a little spike at the end, got a little bit of a left, but the exposure is generally in the middle there. So that's looking quite good. So tip number 1 is to set the Mini 2 into manual mode, set the shutter speed to double your frame rate, also manually set your white balance, and also keep your ISO as low as possible. And using all them together, you can expose your scene. Now tip number 2 is to buy some ND filters for your drone. So I'm just going to come a little bit closer, and you can see just on the drone there, hopefully that's focused, I've got a little ND filter, and you can think of an ND filter as sunglasses for your cameras. So what this does is it limits the amount of light going into the Mini 2 drone. Now, the reason you need this is because, well, it's not the only reason, but there's no aperture control on the Mini 2. It's a fixed aperture at 2.8, so you can't limit the amount of light going into the camera that way. So if you put these on, it just limits the light, and then that means instead of having a shutter speed of, 1/1000 or something super high, you can start to bring that shutter speed down. Now I've got these Freewell ND filters. It came with a pack of 4. and there was an ND8, ND16, ND32 and ND64, and as an added bonus they're all polarised as well, which is super useful. So that'll make the sky a bit bluer and it'll take the reflection glare off water, which again it just helps make everything look a bit nicer. So tip number 2 is to buy some ND filters. Now I will be doing a video showing you the comparison with an ND filter and without an ND filter, and it is a huge difference, so definitely keep that in mind. They are 100% essential. It should be probably one of your first buys when you actually get the drone. So let's get the drone off in the air and then we can have a look at some other ways to get better video on the Mini 2. So let's just send this off. I would send it off on the floor, but it's not the best area here. Right, so let's keep this inside. So we've got a really nice view here. So for tip number 3, we're going to have a look at setting the speed of your drone. So on the controller, you've got 3 different speeds. You've got Cine, Normal and Sport. Cine is, I'll show you this. So Cine is, so this is full speed on the stick forward, and as you can see, it's quite slow and nice. And this is really good for some reveals or just adding a little bit of movement to your scene. I see that's really nice there. If I put it in normal mode, it's going to just be a little bit quicker. Now, depending on what you're filming, this is going to determine your speed. If you're filming something big, you might need the speed a bit higher just to, you know, fit the entire thing in. Or if you're filming something small, you might want smaller movements to kind of really emphasize it. So just have a think about which speed you want to use, and whilst you're just learning and practicing, Cine mode is definitely the way to go. And we've also got Sport mode, which is obviously like a super quick version, which is a little less stable, so it's kind of up to you what speed you want to use. So they all have kind of creative elements to it as well, like depending on how quick you film it is how quick it's going to be in the video, and then you've of course always got options to remap your footage, which is super handy. But I don't really like speeding up drone footage in post. Everything starts to look a bit weird. Like for example, I'm filming over a river here and the river will look sped up in post, or sometimes you can be flying over like some land and then you see some people walk in or a car go past, and then once you've speeded the footage up, it just looks a little bit off and it just doesn't look quite right. So try and get the speed right on location so then you don't have to do as much time remapping in post-production. I think that's really useful. I tend to shoot most of my stuff in normal mode because I feel that I can just go quite slow if I need to by just pulling the stick down just a little bit. Like this is still normal mode and I feel that speed is fine. I mean, if I wanted to go super slow, I can just put it back into Cine mode and then just really tap on it and get some really nice smooth shots. So that's looking quite good as well. But just have a play around with the speeds and see what you're comfortable with, but also use them as a creative choice in your shot as well. Don't just set it for speed just because you can set it in normal and it's fine. It might, the shot you're going for might look better in a different speed. So just keep that in mind and, you know, have a play around with them. And quite similar to that, my 4th tip is to set your resolution and frame rate to something suitable as well. Just because you can shoot in 4K 30 doesn't mean you have to. Is your audience going to see it in 4K? I record in 4K for YouTube, so that's I do tend to record everything in 4K. But for example, as you can see this little bit of running water here, let's get it up on the drone. So that's looking great in 4K 30, but that might look really nice in slow motion as well. So let's put it so let's change the resolution to 1080. Of course we're going to lose a bit of quality here, but then we get the options to go all the way to, and then we get the options to go all the way to 60 FPS. And then that means we need to double our frame rate again, so we'll pop this to 120. And there, look at that. So now when we record this, we're going to get some slow motion to play around with in post-production. So that's half time at 60 frames a second. So just have a think about what your audience is going to be seeing the footage at. Can you actually edit 4K footage? There's no point recording in 4K footage if your PC is going to really struggle. It takes all the enjoyment out of it and you just don't want to edit it then. It gets stressful, it gets frustrating. So if you can't edit 4K on your PC or laptop, shoot 1080. I mean, you can even edit 1080 and some 4K files on a phone now. So just bear in mind what you're shooting, and just because you can shoot 4K 30 doesn't mean you should. Have a bit of a play around. Have a play around with different frame rates. different resolutions, and it just adds more kind of creative choice to your post. And even if you shoot this in slow motion at 1080, you can always upscale it to 4K in post-production anyway. It won't be as good as the quality won't be as good, but you still get a little bit of control as well. So I think that's, you know, just something to bear in mind as well, is where you do have different choices to play with. I'm just going to set mine back to 10 4K 30 FPS. Now I'll set to 25 today. We're in the UK, let's keep it there. And as you see, I've set my shutter speed to, again, double my frame rate. So let's get the drone super high up, and I'm going to show you about, well, not super high, but if you watch my other videos, you'll see that tends to be one of the things that people do when they first get a drone, is to send it all the way up, and then it's too high for things at sometimes. So anyway, let's get it a little bit higher, and let's also sort this exposure out. We're looking a bit hot there. There we go, that's looking great, so it's adjusting the exposure there. Tip number 5 is to plan your movements. With the drone, you've got so many choices to get so many unique angles now, and you know, you've got to make the most of this. And the one I like the most is called Parallax. Now I'm going to do another full video on this because of how useful it is. But let me show you what a parallax is. So we're going to just send the drone back a little bit. Oh, look at that stunning view of the lake there. You see Stockport in the distance. But let's get back to what the parallax is. So parallax is, it's pretty much movement, but you see it in films all the time, and you see it in all sorts of quite cool videos. So what a parallax is, it's when the foreground moves at a different speed to the background. And you can do this, there's a really cool way of getting, and you can do this with a really cool trick on the drone. Now you can do it with the quick shots. If you just go on here, you can't do it because I'm shooting. If you click 4K, if you click your video mode here and go down to quick shot and go down to circle is pretty much a parallax. But I'm going to show you how to do it yourself, because I think it's much better when you can do these things yourself. So let's get the drone a little bit lower. Now, what I tend to do with a parallax is I line the cross up where I want the parallax to be rotating around. So that's looking good to me. I'm going to do it in the centre of the bridge. Now I'm going to knock my right stick to the right, and I'm going to knock my left stick to the left. And then what we're going to do is going to line it up again, back cross. And then what you need to do is you need to put your sticks in opposite directions. So for a left parallax, you move your right stick to the left and your left stick to the right, so you cross them over. Or if you're doing a parallax to the right, you move your right stick to the right and your left stick to the left. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to do a left parallax here. So I'm going to move my left stick to the left very slowly, and then we'll start to see the movement. And then I'm going to move my left stick to the right. And as you can see, we get this kind of like circular movement around the bridge. And this is a parallax. So as you can see, that bridge is moving a lot quicker than that objects in the background. And it's such a nice effect. If you can add this to your scene, it adds so many cinematic elements to it. And it also adds such an element of depth. It's so nice. And that's another tip. If you watch my photography videos, there's a lot on there about depth. But you've got a drone now, and you can get pretty much anywhere with it. And, you know, use that to your advantage. You know, you've got all these arches to fly through. You've got the viaduct to fly along. You've got the water here. Now, if I'm just with my camera, there's very few spots I can get. I mean, there's a lot of spots I can get, but there's a lot more on the drone. You know, like, with the drone, I can get right in over the water. I can get right in under the arch. To get my camera in the middle of the arch, it would take a lot of hassle, but the drone can just get straight there. So really use that to your advantage. And just with a parallax, if you have some depth to your scene, it adds a lot of movement to your scene as well. So if you've got something really close to your drone and then do a parallax, that's going to really amplify the movement. And another way of quickly amplifying a parallax is, let me just show you this, is if you zoom in, just by clicking your zoom button, and then do the same parallax again. So this time I'll do it to the right. So, one sec. I'm going to put it in cine mode for this, so watch this now. Right stick to the right, left to the left. There we go. That's a super nice parallax, and that looks really cinematic. Just getting that kind of sphere motion, that circle motion around the bridge. Just speed this up a little bit. There we go, that's it now. Can you see how it's coming around on itself? It's got to be so gentle on the sticks. I'm literally not even moving them. There we go, let's just try and get around a little bit more. So as a quick summary, to get better video on your Mini 2 drone, we're looking at changing your Mini drone 2 to manual mode. We're looking at setting a manual exposure and a manual white balance. Make sure to do the manual white balance because you can't fix that in post. We also had a look at shooting with an ND filter, so you can get that nice cinematic motion blur at double your frame rate. We had a look at setting the speed for your drone. Just because you can go in sport mode, it doesn't mean you have to. Use your speed as a creative choice because that really will help out, and it'll just kind of make your shots look a bit different to someone else. It's a creative choice, it's your shot then, it's not someone else's shot which is just being replicated by pressing the same buttons. Also, we had a look at actually choosing the right resolution and frame rate as well. Just because you can shoot in 4K doesn't mean you have to. Just because you can shoot in slow motion doesn't mean you have to. So again, use it as a creative choice. This is something what you can use to make your shots look better and better than anyone else's. So again, just bear that in mind and just don't just have it set in 4K 30 or 4K 25 all the time. If you need to change it, mix it up a bit, see what you can get. And just as a quick bonus tip, if you are struggling with exposure at 4K 25 or 4K 30, if you knock it down to 1080 and go to slow motion, that means you can knock your shutter speed up twice as much to still get the same motion blur. So that's a nice quick tip for you there. And then finally, try and add a bit of movement to your scene and add that parallax. So apparently, you know, it's like circling around an object and it's getting a really nice movement on it. The foreground's moving quicker than the background and you get a really nice effect. And also with that, if you zoom in on the drone, that's going to look really nice as well. So thank you very much for watching the video, guys. It does mean a lot to me, and if you do like it, please like, comment and subscribe. That would be amazing, thank you. And if you are looking to buy a Mini 2, I've got an affiliate link down below, so make sure to check that out if that's something what you're looking for. That does help the channel out. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers for watching. I'll see you later.